Hi everyone, Lee from ESU here, and in this video we're going to go more in depth on our innovative, all-new next generation ESU cab control system using the all-new Mobile Control Pro throttle featuring the brake slider. Stay tuned. All right, let's get a little bit more in depth into the system. As you saw in our previous video on how to get everything set up, you're probably now at the Select a Locomotive screen. This is where we can actually start running our trains. And if you really don't need to set anything up more in your locomotives or anything like that, even in the system, you can actually just start running trains right from this screen by simply putting an ESU locomotive right on the track. We turn on our track power by hitting the stop, and almost instantly we're going to see our locomotive register. We can hit open and we can immediately run our trains. We can just run it. We can hit the horn. We can run it either direction. Now out of the box, you'll have to hold the direction knob for about 300 milliseconds and it'll change direction. That's a setting that will show you how to change. But that's all it really takes to get running right away. But of course, if you want to access more than just the 8 functions that you see right on the screen, all we have to do is just swipe up and you can get all 30 functions. No shifts and no other menus to get into to get all of the functions. This is one of the great features of this system is everything is right at your fingertips, so it makes it super easy to run your locomotives. If we have multiple locomotives, we would just do a side swipe to get to those, and we'll show you that here. So I'll put another locomotive on the track. We have this UP-9 here, and as soon as I get it on the rails, it also will register. We can hit open, and then it's just a simple side swipe. So now we have our Jeep 30, and then we have our -9, just that easy. And I can run the -9 right away. So there's no adding the address or anything like that in there. It just automatically picks it up. So that's one of the greatest features of our system. And of course, you'll see the speedometer dial, give you the requested speed, and then all kinds of fun features. So that's one of the greatest things, just to be able to run trains immediately if there's no real major setups you have to do. All right, so now we're going to go on and we're going to show you some of the menu options. All right, so if you want to do some settings changes out of the box, the hamburger menu, our 3-line menu up here in the upper left, tap that, and you're going to see a whole host of options. And in this, you're going to see drive, you're going to see locomotive list, switch, all kinds of fun things in here. So drive will just take you back to the main operating screen, where then, of course, you can enjoy running your trains. If you hit, there's 2 ways to get to the locomotive list. If you hit the plus, it'll take you there and you can choose what locomotives you'd like to run, or you can do it through the 3-line menu, the hamburger menu, and tap locomotive list and it gives you the locomotive list. If you decide maybe you're done running one of the locomotives, you can hit minus and that will remove it. So now the -9 is not easily controllable right here on the throttle because we've removed it from the throttle. But if we want it back, we just hit plus and we can re-tap it and bring it back. So that's kind of how the plus and minus work through the menu as well. If we want to have accessory decoders, we can hit switch and then that will let us throw our accessory decoders. And we've already built one in here. If I wanted to throw it, I could just tap it and it will throw. This little locomotive icon will get us back to the operating screen for the locomotives. If it asks you for the language selection, just hit keep and maybe even ignore that message and it'll go away on you. And then we have accessory panels, so that'll show all your different accessory panels if you have accessory decoders. You may or may not right out of the box have that, but if you do, that's how you would get to it. We also have the ability to do our programming track, so if you've wired up your programming track on the back of the system, separate track, this would be how you would get to the programming track. And you can read your address, you can change values on CVs, whatever you need to do on the program track you can do. And that works with both locomotives equipped with ESU decoders or equipped with another brand. The program track is good for everybody. Next you'll see the program on main, and this is where you can actually program things on the main line. Now with ESU decoders having Railcom, you can actually read back CV data from an ESU decoder on the main, which makes it really convenient so that you can change values while you're actually running your trains. It's pretty fun to do, so highly recommend that if you ever have to make a setting change. Next thing we see is DCC address. So maybe you've got a brand new locomotive and you need to get it set to its cab number. This is where you would go for that. Now note that you will have to have the program track hooked up for this. So the address will just be typed right in. You can hit write and go. If you need to read the address, maybe you're not sure what it's set to, this is how you would read the address back. Now one thing that the system will do with Railcom is when you put a locomotive on, if it's still address 3 and then another address 3, well, the second one's going to get changed, and it's going to get changed to 1000. Now, don't worry about that. It's fine, it'll run, everything's great. But if you want to then set it to its cab number, I would recommend going to this DCC address page and then just change it to the cab number. The system will automatically update the entry to change it from 1000 to its cab number. So that's a really nice feature. And then we keep on going. Then we have our CabControl Settings. We'll get into that in another segment here, as well as the app settings. So that's a quick walk through the side menu on this side. More coming. All right, so now we're going to go in and we're going to look at the CabControl settings. These are the settings that are going to affect the base unit. So in here you will see the ability to upload images. And this is how you would actually upload the images that are stored on the throttle into the ICU itself. And the way you would do that is simply take a picture of your locomotive or download one from the internet and then load it onto the throttle through a USB cable plugged into your computer, load it onto the throttle, and then you'll have the ability to upload it into the system and then assign it to a locomotive. And I'll show you that a little bit later here in the video. The next thing we have is locomotive takeover. So this is allowing the throttle to take over control if another throttle has control. So you can literally steal your friend's locomotive if you want to, and that's where that is checked. If you have a lot of throttles and a lot of operators, you may want to uncheck that so that people can't accidentally steal someone else's locomotive. And then they get wondering why they're having a runaway or something like that. So you definitely want to be careful about that one. And then we have Enable Railcom and Enable Railcom Plus. So this is how our system interacts with our decoders. So you want to make sure that these stay turned on in our system. Even if you have non-Railcom equipped locomotives, you're still going to want to leave this feature turned on. That way any ESU locomotives that you put on the track automatically respond, you get all the full features. So that's a good thing to just leave on. The address assignment. So remember how I was saying that a Railcom will automatically change to 1000. So this is where that will happen. And you can choose if it automatically assigns it to 1000 or if it asks you, prompts you to change it. You may want to have it prompt you because then you could actually type in the address directly and it will set it. Otherwise, it's going to start at 1000, which you can also change. Maybe you want it to start at 500 or some other number. So you can always tap that and change the starting point for having two locomotives registering with the same address. And again, it's kind of a moot point because you can always go back in and change it to its cab number later. Now from here we have delete all auto-registered locos. Maybe you're wanting to get to a point where you want to start over, maybe reset things. You could actually go through and delete every locomotive that's been auto-registered and kind of give yourself a start over point. That's really what that's for. From here we have booster settings, and the booster settings will display the voltage, the temperature, and the current draw of the internal booster, that's the system booster, in the CabControl ICU itself. You can also connect extra boosters called our ECOS Boost to the ECOS link, and those will also show up here in a list. And you can name all of your external boosters to whatever maybe section of your layout that they control. The internal booster has to remain at System Booster. If you tap on the pencil icon here, the edit icon, you'll actually see the current limit. And the current limit from the factory is 4000 mA or 4 amps. We do recommend lowering this number. This way then the system will properly trip if you have a short circuit. If your setting is too high and you have a really tiny short, it may not see enough current draw or current spike in order to trip the breaker off. So I do recommend changing this, and you can change this to several different levels, all the way down to 250 milliamps, which is probably a little bit too low, all the way up to 6,000 milliamps or 6 amps. So if you do run an O scale or G scale, you might want to set it up to these higher numbers. But if you're running an HO or N scale, I do recommend knocking it back to either 2500 or maybe 3000, because you really want, if a short happens, you want it to trip, and you want it to trip fast. And the only way it's going to do that is to set it to a lower value. Now, if you notice, if you get a lot of locomotives running at once and 3000 starts to cause it to trip just by running trains, you could up it to 3500. But above that, I would then recommend getting an EcoSpoost booster and splitting your layout up into different segments so that you can share the power better across your whole railroad. And that way, the boosters still trip properly and you'll have all that great safety features. So try not to go much above 3500 if you can avoid it. And we're going to just hit save on that. If you were actively running a locomotive at this point, you would then see the active current draw from the block. Since we don't have anything running, it's just going to give us the minimum number. You can also individually turn on and off all the boosters from this menu using the little power button there. All right, so we're going to go back out of there. And the last thing in here is the access point settings. So this is if you want to change the ESU Wi-Fi signal's password to another password. Maybe you're running with a club or at a train show and there's another ESU system. You would maybe want to change the ESU Wi-Fi SSID to something more appropriate for your club, or the password to a different password. That way your throttles only connect to yours. This is not such a problem if you're just running trains in your own house. There's probably not going to be any issues there. However, there may be some radio interference. So a lot of Wi-Fis that you might have in your neighborhood, they all are going to probably be on channel 1. Xfinity typically uses channel 1, and I don't know, some of the other ones, CenturyLink may also use channel 1. So there may be a lot of Wi-Fi radio interference in your neighborhood. So if you're noticing any Wi-Fi signal loss, anything like that, then you might want to go in and change the channel, and you can change it to 1 through 9. Now, I do recommend using a Wi-Fi analyzer app on your phone to just see where all the different networks are in your neighborhood, and that way you can see which channel is the most open, and then set it to that channel. Now, after you do change the channel, you'll have to then reboot the ICU, and that way then it'll register the new channel. And you'll probably get a lot better range and have a lot better signal quality by doing that. So that's what I recommend doing. So I'm going to change it to channel 4. We have done some analysis here at the office, and channel 4 seems to be the most clear around our neighborhood, so that works good for us. And then we just hit save. So that's all for the cab control settings, the ICU related settings. Now we're going to go on to the throttle settings through the app settings menu. All right, we're now going to go into app settings. So now we're going to see the command station version, which is 4.3.1 as of this video. There may be a future firmware update that will update that number, but for now that's what it is. You'll also be able to see the IP address and which command station you're connected to, and it should say cab control. So this is a very good point, because if you do run the throttle with the rethrottle protocol, I always say that wrong, and make sure that you're connecting always to the cab control if you're trying to connect your throttle to the ICU, not the Y-throttle protocol, which the ICU also supports, and so does the throttle. So if you find yourself connecting to that, you may run into some issues getting your locomotives to operate properly with the database and everything. So natively, always use the ESU systems when you're running with the ESU components. So you always want to make sure that it says cab control there. If you run the throttle with another system, then obviously it's going to say the Y throttle. Act as main controller, and what this is going to be, if you do run into a connection loss between the throttle and the ICU, it's going to automatically shut the power off on your railroad. You may or may not want this. I highly recommend, if you run on another layout, turn this off. That way you can't accidentally turn off the whole layout. And you may want this on your own layout too, because it's kind of annoying if the track power just randomly shuts off on you. It is on by default. The stop button delay, this is another very important one. So this stop text up here is a capacitive touch. And as you're running the knob, your fingers might brush that text. And so what will happen is, if that is set too low, it's also going to turn your track power off. And also by default, the top button on the right side comes pre-programmed to turn the track power on and off. It's called toggle stop go. And you may want to also change the delay in case you might bump that button. Or change the button assignment, which we'll show you how to do here shortly. But I also recommend changing the stop button delay. Right now it's set for 500 milliseconds. You can go as much as 1,000, which is 1 second. I actually find the 1 second setting to be really good because then it forces you to really know that you're actually wanting to turn track power off. So you can't accidentally brush it. So I'm going to actually just change it to 1,000. The next thing is trace speed. So we have don't move the throttle with the locomotive or when the locomotive is blocked. So that means that if another throttle has control, this one's knob is going to also turn if that same locomotive is selected. And you may not want that because the motorized knob is great, but it does also draw a little bit more battery power when that happens. So you might want to actually disable that feature so that the second throttle doesn't cause this one to move. The other thing we have on here is change of direction. So this is going to be allowing the knob to change direction. So if when you go past 0 and you hit the click, it's going to allow it to change direction. If you'd rather not have the knob change direction and you'd rather actually use the side buttons or the arrows on the screen, then you might want to disable that feature. And also there's the change direction delay. So when the box is unchecked, it's going to change direction immediately when the knob hits the click. If that's checked, it's going to be 300 milliseconds. And that's how it comes out of the box, is set for the 300 milliseconds. There are times where that actually makes a lot of sense. When I've been operating, I find that I do actually like that delay, but it's up to you on how you want that to work. We also have the interactive speed bar. So when that's checked, the speedometer dial on the screen can be tapped, and then the motor is going to turn the knob to match the speed. And so you could actually just tap the screen to change speed rather than use the knob. This is an interesting feature, but I also caution because if you go to swipe across, you may tap the speedometer in just the wrong spot and you may cause the locomotive you're swiping away from to then start running. So if you swipe from the middle of the speedometer, you're safe, but if you accidentally touch the outside ring of the speedometer, it's going to speed that locomotive up right as you're changing away from it. You may not want that. So we recommend, or at least I recommend, turning that off. That way then you can't tap the speedometer, you have to use the knob for the speed. It's again personal preference. If you find that that's more convenient, leave that feature turned on. We also have the ability to show the locomotive speedometer. If you don't like the speedometer and you want to turn it off, you can uncheck that box and then it will look like how our app used to look like with just a speed bar at the bottom with all the functions more at the top. So if you prefer that method, you can certainly set it back for that method. Compact function view, this is where it hides functions that are not being used. So there may be a case where your locomotive has horn, bell, and maybe some lights, but you don't have functions that are super high. And you don't want to see all those unused function buttons or function icons on the screen. And that's where you can choose to disable those. If you'd rather see the blank spaces, then you can certainly do that too. Then we have keep screen on. I do recommend this, even though it does drain the battery a little bit. Keeping the screen on is really convenient when you're operating. And that way the screen can't time out on you and then you go to turn the knob and your train doesn't run anymore. So by keeping the screen on, it always ensures that even if you're not looking at the screen, that the knob will always work. So definitely keep that in mind when you choose that feature. The next one is the speed units. You can either show miles per hour or kilometers per hour. And that's another one that if you're in the United States or anywhere that runs miles per hour, which not very many places do obviously, but if you do run in miles per hour, you would want to have that checked. If you want to run in kilometers per hour, uncheck it and you can choose that. And what that's important for is our real scale speed display, which we'll talk about here shortly. Then we have the invert brake slider. This is a global setting for all brake sliders, including the physical one as well as the on-screen ones that you can set. You can either set the brakes from the top down or from the bottom up. And invert would be from the bottom up. So it just depends on how you prefer to operate. Remember, the brake slider is just like the brake handle in a locomotive. So you would want to just choose, as you're operating and you want to slide this, how you want to do it. By default, you have to slide down to set the brakes and up to release. If you prefer up to set and down to release, invert it. And that may take a little bit of getting used to, but you can certainly get there. And then we have our key bindings, and there's a lot of things you can set these 4 programmable side buttons to do. I do recommend changing this upper right one away from toggle stop go, because again, it shuts your track power off. So you may want to set that to be like an e-stop, and in the e-stop, that's just going to stop your locomotive that you're controlling, not the whole layout. And to change one, you would just tap it, and then you can choose all the different options. And if we go up here, you'll see stop locomotive, there's the e-stop, emergency stop. So now it will just stop the one you're running. But you can program these for a lot of different functions. We have anything from turning on a light function or a sound function, increasing the speed, decreasing the speed, all kinds of fun things. Changing direction, which I actually really like using it for. And then even a lock speed, so it's like a center off. So if you wear the throttle around your neck and it hits your gut, maybe you have a gut like I do, maybe you want the knob to not turn itself when it's rubbing up against your body. So lock speed is kind of nice. You can set it, lock the speed, and now you're not going to accidentally run your locomotive when you don't want to. So any of these buttons can be programmed however you'd like. And we're going to get out of that. And let's see, app settings again. What's in here? So we've got the key bindings. Then we have calibrate throttle. So the calibrate throttle is going to be simply to calibrate the knobs. So if you notice the knob's starting to kind of wander on you, or it's not really getting to 0 properly, you might want to recalibrate it. And it's simple as it just tells you turn the knob past 0 until you get to the click, and then it will come back up. Usually it comes back up to 8. If both numbers are 8, hit OK, and you're good to go. That's really all there is to calibration. The About Mobile Control is going to give you the version number of the throttle itself, firmware version. And the throttles, of course, are firmware updatable. Since version 2.0.0, you can update them through your home Wi-Fi network. And that's really nice. So we're on 2.0.4 as of this video. So you can just connect to your home Wi-Fi and update that way. We're also working on a way to update the throttle if you connect your ICU LAN port to your home network's router. Then you can then connect just to the ESU Wi-Fi signal, and you'll be notified of any updates that way. So that's very nice feature. Check for updates. Of course, we'll do that if you're connected to the internet. And then there's just some open source license information there. So that's really all there is for app settings. So now we'll get into some more of the specifics for locomotives in the menu on the other side, in the 3-dot menu. Okay, so now we're in the 3-dot menu over here to show you some other fun things that you can do to set up your locomotives individually. Everything in the other menu is more kind of global settings. So now we're going to get into individual settings. So if we tap the 3 dots, you'll see Edit Locomotive, Delete Locomotive, Create Locomotive, and I tapped it away too soon there, and Create Consist. So first thing we're going to look at here is Edit Locomotive. So now I'm editing the -9, and you're going to see the address, you're going to see DCC 28 Railcom, that's 28 speed step mode. Of course, if you prefer to run in 128, we actually would encourage you to do that. You can change it there. You can also change the name. So maybe you don't want it to say SXT-9. It is a Scale Trains -9, but you may not want to say that. You can just say maybe UP-9 9734, however you want to do it. You can change that. And as I mentioned before with photos, you can take a picture of the locomotive, upload it into the throttle, and then this is where you would change the picture. You would just tap the picture, and then your picture would show up by tapping the 3 dots and going to image type and then user icons, and then it would appear here. If it was loaded, it would appear here at the top, and then you could just pick your picture and it would set it for your locomotive. If you want a generic one that we have already preloaded in the throttle, you can certainly do that as well, just to get it away from the basic image there of a diesel. We also have steam images as well, and electric images. So now we can decide if we want to run in speed steps or if we want to run in scale speed. And this would be for that gray bar that appears on the outside of the speedometer. So what we can do is actually change this to be miles per hour and then give it a top speed. And most modern locomotives have a top speed of around 70, and I highly recommend using that. We're going to hit green check. And what that's going to do is set the speedometer's range from 0 to 70, scale miles per hour. Now with a little bit of calibration in your locomotive, you can actually get real scale speed feedback from the locomotive to the system. So now you can really enforce your speed limits on your layout, and it's a lot of fun. You do need a speedometer, and you would run the locomotive at max speed through the speedometer and basically adjust CV53 down until it hits 70. Now I do recommend also setting a linear speed curve in your locomotive. You can do that with setting CV6 to 127 first, or if you use the full 28 point, just set it for linear, and then start by setting CV53 to around 90. Generally that's going to be really close to getting your locomotive to run at scale speed 70. Maybe you don't want to go 70, maybe you'd want 65, but just note that whatever you set as your max speed doesn't mean that you have to run that fast. Maybe your speed limit on your layout is 40 or something. You don't ever run faster than 40. But I do recommend setting it to 70 or 65, something relatively high. And the reason for that is you want the sound to stay connected to the speed. If you start to get your top speed a little bit too low, now you're going to be sounding like you're in a really high RPM when maybe you're not going very fast. And the sound isn't really connected to the speed as accurately as it should be. So you definitely want to keep that relatively high, even if you never run that fast. I would never run that fast on my own layout, but it just allows you to have a little bit more range when it comes to the sound. But then once you get it all calibrated, no matter what speed you want to run at, if you want to run at 35, you're going 35. If you're going 25, you're going 25. And it's going to report that right on the throttle. It also works, of course, for kilometers per hour if you set that in the global settings we talked about earlier. So that's really fun. In the Mobile Control Pro, we also have the brake slider settings. And you're going to see the brake slider left, the brake slider right, and the physical brake slider. The left and right ones are going to be for on-screen sliders that appear on either side of the speedometer dial. So those you would set, and you can set a brake function logic, and you can set a function that will trigger. Now typically on ESU sound files, function 10 is the independent brake, and it's tied to brake 1 logic. So then if you want the brake slider to work on independent brake, you would just tie the brake slider to brake function 1. And I'm going to actually set that for the physical slider as well as F10, and you can see it's actually already set in here, brake function 1 and function 10. And what that's going to do then is play the independent brake sound when I hit the brake slider here on the side of the throttle. If you also want the automatic brake, which is typically on F30 in our system, you can set that as a brake slider maybe on the right side or on the left, however you want to do it, and now you'll be able to play the automatic brake sound. And with a few more settings that is beyond the scope of this video, you can actually get 2 different braking rates, but we'll talk about that in a future video. All right, so next thing we have is the function icons. So this is what's going to show up on your function list to give you an idea of what the function controls. So you're going to have your lights, your bell, your horn, all kinds of fun things, coupler sounds, fan sounds, and you can toggle the function on or off. You can have the function be an on-off toggle, or you can have the function be momentary. And all 30 functions can be either on-off or they can be momentary. We don't limit you to just having function 2 for the horn being momentary. You can also invert the function. So if you want something to play when the function is off and not when it's on, then you can invert the function. And of course you can always change the icons. So just tap the icon and you can change the icon to be something different. So if there's something more appropriate that you think would fit better, you can always change the icon to match. There's quite a few in here to choose from. So that's pretty much the simplest way to edit your locomotive and customize the individual settings for the locomotive. Now note that when you do the brake slider and all that for this locomotive, it does not also happen for this one. So you'd have to go in and edit this one as well, and then you'll see the brake sliders and all that for this one as well if you want it. So you'll let you choose which locomotives you have the certain features on, because there might be some where you want it and maybe others that you don't want it. When you're all happy with every setting, you can hit save, and then it'll go back to the main screen. You'll see our speedometer dial now shows top speed is 70 miles per hour instead of 28 speed steps. So now if we go into the three dots again, if we go to delete locomotive, that's pretty obvious is what that does. It will ask you, are you sure you want to delete it? And you can say yes. What that does is it actually deletes it out of the database in the command station, so we can delete it. A word of warning on that, if you do delete it with the track power on, a few seconds later, it will re-register itself if it's still on the track. So I do recommend that after you delete it, turn the track power off or pull it off the track. But definitely delete it with track power turned on. Then just quickly remove it so that it doesn't re-register. Next thing is create locomotive, which we talked about in the previous video, one of the previous videos about how to do that for a non-ESU locomotive. You could also do it for an ESU locomotive maybe if it doesn't want to register, but all ESU locomotives will register if Railcom is turned on in the decoder. So you should not have to do that for an ESU decoder. But any non-ESU decoder, you would create locomotive manually, type in the address, give it a name if you'd like, and set up all the functions if you'd like, and even a picture, again, brake slider, all the same settings you have for creating a locomotive manually. It just takes a little bit longer because you have to do it manually. So we're going to actually discard the changes because I don't want to actually do that. So that's that. The next feature in here is create consist. This is a big one for our system. Consists in our system are super easy. Oh, excuse me. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a consist with this -9 and with this Southern GP30, which it's a great combination, right? But what we're going to do is give it a name, and I'm just going to see if I can type upside down here. We're going to give it test. There we go. I think I got it. I did. And we're going to hit check. Okay, so I gave it a name. We're just going to call it test for now. The -9 is showing in forward. Forward is to the right with the blue arrow to the right. And now you have to have at least one locomotive to have a consist even exist. So we could actually end right here, and this would be its own consist by itself. It's a little screwy to have a single locomotive as a consist, but you could do it. Now what we're going to do is add the GP30. Now it's the only other locomotive in the list, but if you had more, you could certainly add more. And it's going in reverse when the -9 goes forward. So I'm just going to tap the direction arrow to show that it's going in reverse. And that's it. Now we just hit save. And now we see a new entry called test. And if I turn the knob, they both run. Just like that. And I got to change direction again. There we go. Get them to go the other way. There we go. Now we're going the other way. Now they may or may not be perfectly speed matched, but at least you can get them to run together. Maybe a little more configuration on the speed matching. If you've calibrated them to a speedometer, though, they will be automatically speed matched. That's the beauty of that feature. But now we can run them that way. Now if you want, you can control individual lighting and horn and bell from the locomotive that's always in the lead. And this is where our system is really, really nice for this, because all you got to do is simply swipe over, and now we're controlling the -9. It's going to show multi, which tells you that it's in a consist, but now I can turn the light on. I can have the horn only come from this locomotive. I don't have to worry about the rear light on the southern unit or the horn or the bell activating from this locomotive when I run the consist. That is a really, really nice feature. We don't worry about consist addresses, and we don't worry about consist function control. You always just control the consist from whichever locomotive is in the lead, and we can do that. And its headlight is on, even though you really can't see that in the video, but the headlight's on, this one's off, just like it should be. Now if I do want to get to the end of the line and I want to change ends, well, that's easy too. I just shut this one down, turn all of its lights off, swipe over to the GP30, and now I can turn its light on, and I get the horn from it, and we can change ends, and now we can go the other direction, and everything comes out of this locomotive and not the -9. So that is one of the greatest things about our consisting, is that you can really customize the locomotive lighting and the sounds for each one in the consist. And you can run the consist from any member of the consist, even if it's a middle unit or a DPU on the other end. So that's really, really neat feature. The other neat feature that we have is once you go to the consist menu, you will now see a double locomotive icon. And this allows you to quickly add or delete a locomotive from the consist. So if I tap this, maybe, come on. It's not going to work because I don't have, there it goes, it did work. And now what you'll see is all the locomotives in the consist, but if I had another one I could add, I could just tap the plus and I could add it. And right now it's going to add that locomotive in forward only. A future update will come where you can actually add it in the direction it's already set for, and it will just automatically add it. So if you wanted to add it in reverse, it would just add it in reverse. Likewise, you can delete a locomotive by hitting the minus key. So it's a quick way to add and subtract locomotives from your consist. Why is this important? Well, maybe you have helpers on your layout and your train pulls up to the helper pocket. Now you can go in, add the helper, or drive the helper actually over to the consist, add the helper to the consist, go up your hill, get to the top of the hill, and now you want to remove it, hit minus, and it's gone. Move it back over to the helper pocket at the top of the hill, and your train continues on down the line. So this really is a great way to add and delete locomotives from consist. Maybe you run with DPUs, and maybe now your train gets to a place where it needs to do some switching, and you don't want the rear units to move while the head end is doing the switching. Remove the rear units temporarily, do all your switching, and then when you get back to your train, add them back in. So that is really a great way to utilize the quick consist menu. And even if you do have to go in and change direction on something, it's really still simple, because you can still tap the 3 dots and you can go back into the consist. We can just do an edit locomotive, and you can now edit the consist to change the direction of a locomotive added. So if you do currently have one that wants to be added in reverse, it's still very easy to do. Okay, back to the main screen. Okay, so that's going to pretty much wrap up that feature, all those features. Next, we'll talk a little bit about accessories. Okay, so now we're going to hit the switch icon on the top of the screen here, and that's going to allow us to see our accessories. There we go. Got to get in the right spot. It's hard to do upside down. All right, so now on the new overview, you're going to see all accessories that have ever been added to the system. This is a really nice menu because now you don't have to search through all your different panels that you may have created. You can just see all of your accessories right here. It'll tell you what turnout number it is and such like that. And you can just tap it and you can throw your switches. If you do have separate panels, you can have 16 different turnouts added, or signals added to a panel, and you can have several different panels. The system supports, I believe it's 2,048 different accessories, so generally no one will ever exceed that. There's plenty of space for accessories. But let's just say we want to create a new accessory. So it's going to be simply adding in the accessory by hitting the 3 dots. We have to edit the panel first. Actually, let's go back a second, because you may not have a panel, so we have to create one. So let's do create panel. We're going to create a new panel, and I'm going to call it panel number 2, because I already have a panel 1. And we're going to hit save. So now we actually have a second panel. Yours would be panel 1 if it's the first panel for you. We're going to tap the 3 dots, and we're going to say edit panel. And now we're going to tap a square that's open, and then it's going to say select accessory. Now maybe we don't want to add this turnout 1 to that panel. We want to add a new one. So now we tap the 3 dots, we say create accessory, and now we have our accessory menu where you can now create a switch or a signal or whatever you want to create. And there's a lot of options in here. There's regular left and right turnouts, there's a 3-way turnout, there's a double slip, There's a 4-way double slip, 2-way double slip, signals, all kinds of great stuff. Lights, even crossing gates, which is known as a boom gate, which is, I love that name. There's all kinds of great stuff in here. Uncoupling tracks, crossovers, whatever you want to create. So that's really nice. So now we're going to just create we're going to create a left-hand turnout this time. So we have a left-hand turnout. We can give it a name. Yours will probably be turnout 1, but you can always, turnout 500 if you'd like, right? Doesn't matter. The name is just for you. Turnout number 2, because I already have a turnout 1, so we're going to do that. Save. Actually, no, I'm not going to save just yet. Now we also have to put in the address of the turnout. So if you're using one of our switch pilots, all the outputs are just simply addresses, 1 through 4, 1 through 8, however it works. If you have more than one, then it goes on from there. But every output is just a simple address. So we're going to have a turnout on address 2, and toggle's good, and 250 milliseconds is good. Even if you have a slow motion machine or a twin coil, just leave that setting. And then we're just going to hit save. Now we have turnout 2, we're going to put on panel 2. Hit it, it's now there. Hit save on the panel, and now we can actually activate turnout 2 on panel 2. We can always go back to panel 1 and activate turnout 1 on panel 1. If we go back to overview, now we're going to see both turnouts, and you can throw them individually. So that's pretty simple for creating a turnout in the accessories. The only thing that the Mobile Control 2 and the CabControl system don't support is block occupancy detection display. However, you can connect the system to a computer through computer software, and then you can see the block occupancy detection through our ECOS detectors. You can also, of course, throw your turnouts that way as well. So that's just a quick overview on how to set up accessories, which are real easy and real fun to do in the system. We'll go back to the locomotives. We're back to our locomotive screen. You can also run locomotives while you're in the switching section, and so you can throw turnouts while you're switching. It's real simple, real easy to do. So that's pretty much that. Another quick overview of the throttle. The stop is a capacitive touch, as we talked about, but so are also the 3 icons at the bottom. So the 3 lines is going to be your to display what windows are open. Maybe you want to see other things at once. Then we have the home button, which will just take you back to the desktop. And then we have the return button. So when you're done operating for the day, turn off your track power and then double tap on the return button, and that actually will close the ESU app. And then you can shut the throttle down. You can also temporarily turn the throttle screen off by tapping once on the power button, and that will turn the screen off. If you want to, maybe you're sitting in a siding at a red signal and you don't want to waste the battery, just tap it once again to bring it back. So that's pretty easy to do. That's pretty much it. Everything else with the throttle is going to be more internal Android operating system type stuff, which you can certainly explore on your own, but that's really it. In the debugging, I will tell you that's how I turned on this nice little feature to see my taps. You might not be able to see that on camera, but I have a nice little way to see where my finger is actually tapping on the screen. That can be very useful. But beyond that, that's really about it. If you do run into any Wi-Fi issues, you can swipe down from the top of the screen, and the Wi-Fi settings are going to be in the corner. You always want to make sure that you're on the ESU Wi-Fi signal, and you can look at the ESU Wi-Fi signal. If you do run into an issue where it won't connect to it, the password is just the numbers 1 through 9 by default, and you can type that back in, and then it should connect back in. So that's just a quick network thing. But anyway, that's really going to be about it. Hopefully we touched on everything that you would need to know with the throttle and the system. It's a really great system and a lot of fun to play with, of course, and seeing the real scale speed display and all those fun things that you can get to. So we highly encourage you to really enjoy the experience. You know, it's just a lot of fun. You can see the gray bar come up there, but you know, I don't have a lot of tracks, so make sure they stay on the track. But anyway, enjoy the system. and let us know if you ever run into any issues. If you have any questions specifically that maybe I didn't answer, put them in the comments below and we'll try to get to you. You can also send us an email at support@lokesound.com, and also visit our website, lokesound.com, for more information on the CabControl system and our decoders, accessory decoders. We have our ECOS Boost Booster. We have the way to extend the ECOS Link through our ECOS Link terminal, and all of our Railcom detectors, accessory detector or accessory modules like the switch pilots, the signal pilot if you want to run twin or slow motion machines. It's really good for that, as well as signals. All that connects up. Of course, our decoders, our Loke Sound decoders, our Loke Pilot decoders, all kinds of great stuff. We also have our manuals. The full manual for the system is now online, and we do highly recommend you peruse through that. It will answer a lot of your questions. So definitely check that out before you contact us if you can. And if the question's not fully answered in the manual, then definitely give us a shout. And we thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll catch you next time right here on our channel, ESU DCC.